Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Raggio. I'm a senior fellow at Foundation for Defense of Democracies and editor of FDD's Long War Journal. And this is Generation Jihad, the podcast that covers all things that used to be known as the War on Terror, but which we call the Long War. Today, I have my friend Joe Trusman, my friend and colleague, of course. He's a research analyst at Foundation for Defense of Democracies, as well as a contributor to the Long War Journal. Joe, welcome back. I'm looking forward to getting your update to get my morning briefing here on what's happening.
Hey, Bill. Nice to be here.
Yeah, so we had a lot going on this weekend. We last talked Friday. This is recording it on Sunday morning for the listeners, just so you can, anything that happens after we get off the horn, that we can't be responsible for. So, Joe, let's start off with a quick status on the fighting in and around Gaza. What is happening in that theater? Have the Israelis advanced yet? Yes, the other day they issued a warning to force Palestinian civilians to flee south of what they called Wadi Gaza. What do we know? What's going on?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So everything indicates that, at least the reports indicate that Israel is about to launch a ground invasion into Gaza. Yes, just like you're saying, that report, they notified Palestinian residents of northern Gaza to move south, and there's also some reports that the Israeli forces have already entered northern Gaza or Gaza. I'm not sure exactly where, but the reports they're not very detailed. That I think it was just to maybe check some villages and things like that, but nothing significant, right? So there are some reports that there's been forces in there already, but the main force has yet to get in there. So, but yeah, so far been a few developments. Of course, Israel continues to strike targets inside of Gaza. They're going after Hamas infrastructure and other groups as well. Of course, Islamic Jihad and others. And there have also been some targeted killing operations. We can go into that here in a little bit. But yeah, so that continues there, but in Gaza. But also, we're seeing other fronts being involved, especially in the north and southern, between northern Israel and southern Lebanon. So again, that's something else we can talk about too after. So
yeah, we'll turn to that.
Yeah,
we'll focus on the south here right now. Is Hamas and company continue? Are they still able to launch rockets? Is that what they've been limited to in this fight right now?
Yeah, they continue to launch rockets. They continue to attack Tel Aviv, central Israel. They haven't fired any rockets against Jerusalem in some days now. So, which is a bit farther than Tel Aviv. Not a lot farther, but still a bit farther. So, but I think right now, what I'm noticing is a pattern. And as an analyst, you gotta love patterns, right?
Yeah,
you see a pattern, boom, yes, that's perfect. So, and what I'm seeing here is that Hamas and company they're firing during the day, right? It like picks up in the afternoon, local time that is, and then as the day goes on, the evening goes on, it starts to wane a little bit, and then overnight, let's say about 10 o'clock to like 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, you may not. At times, there's no rockets. There's nothing. It's quiet, right? At least from rocket launches. Though the Israelis, the IDF is constantly bombing Gaza. By the way, they don't stop. They're hitting those targets, those terrorist targets. So, but I think the reason for that is this: the reason why there's like this lull. It's not because they don't want to continue. It doesn't mean it's not because Hamas doesn't want to continue launching rockets. It's that their supply isn't. It's not unlimited, right? It's they have to conserve their ammo here because we know this is going to be a long conflict, this long war. So, and this is something they've been preparing for years, of course. So they're conserving their ammunition. That's basically it, right? And then they have a bunch of other groups that can support them by launching mortars and short range rockets, targeting the periphery of the Gaza border there, the Israeli communities there. So yeah, that's the pattern that I'm seeing. over the last, 9 days now, right? So yeah, so Hamas is just they're conserving ammo, but they are definitely firing rockets every day. And of course the Israelis are responding.
And yeah, that makes sense, Joe. If they want to, if they view this as a prolonged conflict, which they really have to, and they want to show that they still have an offensive punch, they're going to have to spread their limited supply. They're not getting supplied from outside. I mean, sure, things might be getting smuggled through the tunnels across from Egypt, but they're not going to get that in quantities that, there's those supplies are going to start dwindling. Do you have a gauge for the last couple of days, the number of rockets that have been fired?
That's the interesting thing because it's a very good question because usually I see an update, but I haven't seen one in a while. At least usually the Israelis, the IDF will say, you know, 4,000 rockets have been fired in X amount of days. And I haven't seen that. Now, that doesn't mean that data, those figures aren't out there. I just haven't seen it. It's because maybe I've just been really busy too.
Yeah,
so
there's a lot of everything to look at, right?
Right. But I'll tell you this. I suspect that it's going to be the most rockets fired from Gaza, basically during a conflict with Israel ever. And this is just we're like I said, like 9 days in now, so
Yeah.
it's going to be it's going to be high regardless. So I haven't seen those figures yet, but I'm sure there may be out there. And like I said, I just haven't seen them.
Yes. So is Israel's preparing the battlefield for its and what we believe to be its invasion of Gaza, right? We've seen the images of Israeli armored vehicles just lined up along the border in fields. So I suspect that's happening. They've been preparing the battlefield, right? The airstrikes against bunkers, tunnels, command centers, communications nodes, weapons storage, but they've also been going after high value targets. And you noted yesterday there's been some significant high value target kills by the Israeli. Tell us a little bit about who they've been going after and who they've gotten and who they really want to get.
Right. So yeah, we've kind of talked about this before. I've stated this on Twitter too. That the Israelis are going to go after, definitely going to go after commanders, uh, engineers, key people, right? Key people that are part of the organization. Yep. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they've done that before in 2021. Actually, in 2020, we wrote about this on Long War Journal. An American engineer or a Hamas fighter with American citizenship who was an engineer, including his father, who was an engineer, uh, were killed by an IDF airstrike, and they worked on. I think it was either the drones or rockets, Hamas drones or rockets. Like, I can't recall, but yeah. So, and those are key people, right? Because they are the ones that produce and help produce these arms. But anyway, but yeah. So they're going after obviously the foot soldiers on the ground. They're going after their commanders, and then they're just going up the chain, right? So, but for sure, I have no doubt, they're going after the top guys in Gaza, which is Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Deif, and his deputy Marwan Issa. I think those guys are definitely have pretty big targets on their back right now. So, and then there's a lot of other guys too. Don't get me wrong. And on top, I think it's important for people to know is that Hamas's leadership isn't just all in Gaza. They're in Doha. They're in Turkey. They're in Iran. They're in Lebanon. They're in Syria. Yeah, they're everywhere. It's not just one spot. So that's what I'm saying. That's I think that's a reason why people. I think people should note that this is going to be a long war, because especially if they're going to try to go after all these guys. So, are they going to be successful? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. These guys have been hiding for a long time, and so far they've been successful at it. But now things are different. So, but yeah.
I mean, if they go in on the ground, though, Joe, they have not done this in the past. Look, I'm with you. It's a really difficult proposition. And the other question is can they start leaking across the border into Egypt? But
right, and that's the scare. That's concerning, right? Because the whole Egypt, trying to get civilians into Egypt, right? We've been hearing about this like as humanitarian reasons, which of course 100% I'm behind. You need to get these civilians out because they're not a part of this war. Shouldn't be. They shouldn't be victimized here because they're already victimized by Hamas, of course. But these leaders, these terrorists, can easily slip out right into Egypt. I mean, they've already been to Egypt before, so it's yeah. I think that's a huge concern of the Israelis, right? That these guys are going to escape into Egypt, even though Egypt is not. I'm not saying Egypt is culpable here as far as allowing terrorists into their country, but it can happen, right? So I think that's definitely a concern.
Yeah, if I saw a report that was trying to set up a camp for 1 million civilians in Egypt. I mean, how do you filter?
Right.
If you want to prevent this, the military age males just have to be separated out. There's just no two ways about it.
Right.
How does that happen? Who does that? What's the mechanism for that? And that's now on the flip side, Hamas is going to have to decide, does it want to bleed Israel as it moves into Gaza? And some of these commanders are going to be key to leading that fight. But guys like Deef and Yassin and whatnot, you know what? They can lead this fight from afar, or they can delegate to their commanders. And one of the important things too that you noted in your article the other day, they're taking out some key mid-level commanders, and that is important. That makes things difficult for command and control from the top level military, particularly if you were looking at the military leadership, to their fighters on the ground. Right, you'd start taking out the middlemen, and things get harder and harder to coordinate orders, things of that nature. So it's this is what Israel has to do, but they have a lot of challenges. If they don't seize that border with between Gaza and Egypt, which I don't see that happening, they really can't control that flow of refugees and the flow of the key Hamas leaders who are not going to get caught up in this street fighting. They're going to probably be able to escape.
Right. And just quickly, some of these HVTs or these high value targets that I mentioned in a Long War Journal that were at least taken out according to the IDF is there's two of them. There's one guy, Mirad Abu Mirad, who the IDF said headed the air operations of the Hamas. And by the way, when they say air operations, I'm not talking about like Hamas, like an actual like air force, like they have jets or something, but I suspect they're talking about drones because Hamas has drones. So I think he commanded this drone force, let's say. The other was Ali Qadi. Ali Qadi, he was a commander for the Nukhba unit. The Nukhba unit is a specially trained division that Hamas has. They're like commandos, a commando unit, right? Like sort of like Navy SEALs, but not nearly as good. And so anyway, but he was he was a commander in that unit. So both of them were taken out by the IDF, or at least according to the IDF. I haven't seen any official statements by Hamas saying that they were taken out, they were eliminated, but they have mostly refrained from saying who's been killed so far. And they did mention a few guys that were from Lebanon that were killed, that were tried to infiltrate Israel from Lebanon and were killed. But they mostly refrained from saying who's died. And I think, honestly, it's some of it has to do with morale, right? I don't think they want to publish like hundreds of names of fighters of these terrorists that have been killed by Israel, because it's just going to be a lot. When this ends, it's going to be a huge number. So we'll see. But those are some of the guys that have been killed so far by the Israelis.
Yeah, and there's one other aspect too from Hamas's and all these other groups' standpoint. They don't want to validate Israeli intelligence as well.
Right.
If they start telling them, hey, you succeeded, then the Israelis have a good understanding of what their intelligence capabilities, what they're able to find. So they'll want to keep the Israeli Air Force, the Israeli military in the dark, and not give them, again, validation of their methods of targeting as well. So exactly. Let's turn to the north, Joe. We've seen some fire coming across the border, some rocket fire. I believe there's been some also it appears to be anti-tank or guided missiles have been fired at Israeli tanks. I've
Mhm.
heard there's been at least 10 Israeli soldiers killed up north. Is that correct? Tell us what's going on.
I can't tell you exactly how many soldiers have been killed. However, but I can tell you is that uh, and again pattern, right? So I'm noting that as the days go on here during this war, that there's more attacks coming from the border. Like today, for example, there have been more attacks today from southern Lebanon into northern Israel that there have been since this war started. So uh, there have been attacks against, like you said, the IDF positions. But the interesting thing here is compared to previous fighting in the north, in northern Israel and southern Lebanon, is that this is a combined, a coordinated effort by Hezbollah, of course, but Hamas and Islamic Jihad. They are launching assaults against Israeli targets in the north, in northern Israel. Some have been successful, some haven't. I think it was yesterday, Hamas published a statement mourning a military communique, mourning the death of two or three members rather, that were killed trying to infiltrate northern Israel. So, and that's new, which is new in the sense that we haven't seen that anything like that in years. We can go back to like the 60s and 70s where there were infiltrations from southern Lebanon by Palestinian guerrillas. Okay, that resulted in the deaths of Israelis, but that's decades and decades ago. So, but anyway, so yeah, so I'm seeing this like obvious coordinated effort by Palestinian groups and Hezbollah. So in the north, and it's increasing. Okay, and so yeah, that's definitely concerning. Will it blow up into like a all out conflict, like sort of like we're seeing in southern Gaza right now? I hope not, but it's getting to that. It's getting there, and that's very concerning because obviously Israel doesn't want to be fighting on two fronts, especially doesn't want to be fighting Hezbollah and Hamas at the same time. So we'll see what happens there. But that's what those are the patterns that I've noticed so far, at least in the north.
Yeah, I would expect if Hezbollah is going to weigh in here, and I suspect they will, they're probably waiting for that justification, like what they view as justification, because that seems to be their messaging, right? Don't
Mm-hmm.
do this. Don't go into Gaza. If you do, we're going to respond. That's like the message that we've heard from a lot of these Iranian-backed Shia groups, and
Mm-hmm.
so I suspect they're waiting for that, and they think they're going to catch the Israelis off guard. I think they've made a mistake. They would have been better off hitting both at the same time. Again, a week ago, I really think that would have caught the Israelis off guard and may have had a more spectacular effect. But we'll see. It's hard to know what the strategy is of the,
Mm-hmm.
put it in work quotes, resistance, what Iran really wants out of this. Do they want to slow bleed the Israelis? Do they want a spectacular attack like we had on October 7th? So, we have to watch this one play out, but I don't think anything good is going to happen come of this.
Right. And honestly, I think all of this, what's happening, um, is pre-planned. Okay. So yeah, there might be some things that are done at the moment, right? But by Hezbollah, but I just don't. I think all of this is pre-planned, all of it. So it's what we're seeing now is just they're just executing things, they're executing these attacks. So what I do fear, I don't expect something like what happened in southern Lebanon to happen in northern Israel, because I think the element of surprise is gone, obviously. But
Concur 100%.
yeah, but what I do fear or I'm concerned about is, let's say, mass drone attack by Hezbollah or mass rocket attack. That would be something. If something were to kick off the opening of the second front, and you could already argue this second front's already been opened, but a massive attack would be in the form of drones, including or rockets, or a combination. Because Hezbollah has it; they can do it. It can overwhelm the Israeli Iron Dome, the defense system, the rocket defense system that they have, the aerial defense system. Um, so yeah, and they have. By the way, the Israelis do have more than just the Iron Dome. They have David Sling, and so it's. But anyway, yeah. So we haven't seen that yet. So Hezbollah is holding back, okay, for a reason. But they certainly can unleash a lot if they want. But that would absolutely invite a massive retaliation by the Israelis, not only in southern Lebanon, but I imagine in sections of Beirut uh, where Hezbollah is present. So yeah, so we haven't seen that yet. Thankfully, will that happen? I can't tell you.
Yep, it's this is sort of, we're waiting for this shoe to drop, and hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully Hezbollah decides it doesn't want to enter this. I don't think that's going to happen. Like you said, I think this has been planned out. This has been gamed out. I'm sure they may be adjusting fire as it goes on, but I find it difficult to believe that Hezbollah and Iran aren't going to want to weigh in once this offensive begins, to take advantage of the propaganda effect of the Israeli military going in on the ground in Gaza. And speaking of propaganda, we're going to talk about two quick items. The first one, which you had tweeted about, actually, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. It reminds me of that Monty Python, right? I'm dating myself, but the Monty Python skit with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and the People's Front for, all that stuff. But anyway, they they issue an announcement and tell them where the head of their press office and one of their members of their political bureau, that they're located in the Al Shifa medical complex in Gaza City. I mean, are they crazy? Was this a mistake by them? Right. Their phone numbers are attached to it. I mean, let's just advertise that we're sheltering in hospitals. It's absolute. We know they do this. We know they shelter in schools and hospitals and civilian buildings and press, buildings that house the international press and stuff like that. But it's really absurd to see them admit this, to say it out loud like this.
Right. And I did note this. It may be a ruse, but the interesting thing is that Gaza City is, I expect Gaza City to be, it is already, but to be a major area where the IDF is going to concentrate not only its strikes, but perhaps its ground troops. Because, the Shifa Medical Complex, the Shifa Hospital, Shifa Hospital, has been known for a very long time, at least underneath it. Below it, rather, to shelter members of leadership of Hamas and others, just because, it's a hospital. So they know the Israelis aren't going to bomb a hospital full of patients and civilians and things like that, because, the international outcry that it would produce. So they've been doing that for a long time. So that's not anything new. And I absolutely believe that they're still underneath there. And there's a lot of history about Shifa Hospital and underneath there. I won't get into that, but anyway, so yeah, they published this information. When I first saw it, I was telling myself, you got to be kidding me. This is what are you doing? And but it wouldn't surprise me, because these groups slip up. They do slip up. I've seen it before many times. I've seen it, and they slip up. They publish something. For example, this is a very good one, and you haven't mentioned this. I can't say this is Hamas. You could blame, I don't know, the Palestinian media, whatever. But a few days ago, there was someone recorded, and this was in a hospital in Gaza, of someone carrying a baby. Yeah, it's a fake baby.
Yeah, I saw this one. That was great.
It's a fake baby, and I was like, oh, the person carrying it. He's just sad. That obviously something you would expect from someone that's just lost a child. Of course, you see it in his face, but you look at the baby. That's a fake baby. It's just fake. And so and I don't like to get into the term Hollywood, but this is the type of stuff that's seen before, right? That this fake stuff, fake injuries. There's no need to, I don't think you need to do that. But anyways,
They
Uh,
feel they do. They
they
feel
feel. I don't know.
they're
Yeah,
manipulating the press. Look, and that's not to say civilians aren't dying and children aren't
exactly,
dying. We know this
exactly.
is happening. This is war. This is what happens in war. But when you're faking it,
Yeah, I know.
my sympathy level just drops a notch there, and you have to question everything you see.
But yeah, because we got people have to understand too. Everything, almost everything that comes out of Gaza is controlled by Hamas. Hamas has a stranglehold on everything there. Journalists, just the it's everything. I mean, I've done research in the past and where a Hamas police officer also was a journalist, quote unquote journalist. You could call it whatever you want. Yeah, so it was just so they control everything. So yeah, there's a bunch of people, press and things like that at the hospital, taking pictures of everybody going in, all the patients and stuff like that. Yeah, just for to publish online. And yeah, so this guy was carrying, well, a fake baby, and somehow the I don't know who didn't really realize it and published it online, and boom, you got a guy carrying a doll, essentially. So
They're not perfect. They make mistakes. Yeah, and look, this
yeah,
is. I think they have a high look. There's a lot of sympathy. There's in certainly in the press in the Arab world, they're never going to be called on that. And here in the West, things like that get overlooked for
oh yeah,
other for whatever reason. But yeah, this is what's happening. And one last one, Joe.
yeah,
We'll end with this. You noted that Hezbollah is responding. So there were some journalists that were killed and wounded, or at least one journalist was killed and several were wounded apparently in an Israeli strike on a home in Sheba Farms, which is in northern Israel, or I'm sorry, the southern Lebanon. And Hezbollah said they're going to respond to this, and they called it the intentional targeting, right? And one of the things I noted that look, when you put yourself next to, I've done embeds, right? People know Iraq and Afghanistan. I was, when I'm with Marines, when I'm with the Iraqi Army, U.S. Army, Canadian Army, I recognized that like a mortar could drop in. I could be hit with an RPG. I could be hit with an IED. And I would never have said that I was directly targeted. I was accompanying troops. And this is the situation, but this is another example of how the groups like Hamas and Hezbollah try to garner sympathy, particularly with the Western press. And
Mhm.
it's really, I mean, to someone like me, it's really offensive. It's just going the extra mile, lying about something that just, isn't the case. Do you think the Israelis sat there, with like Monty Burns rubbing their hands and going, let's target that journalist over there? We'll, I see him on my camera and I'm going to kill him. It just doesn't work like that. They had a target that they were going after. A journalist was accompanying, and here you go.
Right. Yeah. I definitely don't think that it was intentional, and I don't even know if it was the Israelis that did it. Right. So, I mean, this is a war zone. This is so there's I don't have to tell you, Bill. You know what it's like, and so there's fire coming from everywhere. So, but yeah, they're just what they're doing is trying to garner sympathy, of course. But they're not responding because of a journalist was killed. They're
Yeah.
responding because they want to kill Israelis. They just say that they're trying to, they're doing it in the name of so and so and so who was a journalist for whatever news organization, because they want to. They're trying to keep up the illusion that they're fighting for the people, right? For civilians. They're not. They're an Iranian proxy. They are doing what Iran wants them to do. And they certainly don't care about civilians. If they cared about civilians, they wouldn't. Hezbollah, Hamas, and other armed groups wouldn't be storing rockets in homes. They wouldn't be firing on other civilians. It's ridiculous, but
Put their
it's
people
just
in hospital.
yeah, exactly. It's nonsense, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't get that, right? So because they just don't know how things are, how messed up things are, basically, and that's putting it lightly. So I'm not surprised that they publish things, and Hamas is doing it the same thing. They're saying we bombed Tel Aviv because Israel continues to attack civilians in the Gaza Strip. No, you're not bombing Tel Aviv because they're Israel is attacking civilians. You're just bombing Tel Aviv because you're trying to kill people. That's it. So and they're just making things up to sound to keep up this illusion of, quote unquote, like so-called resistance, right?
Right.
The resist. I'm sorry, resistance groups don't go into communities and slaughter people and abduct children, and it's just awful. So anyway, so that's it. So we're going to see a lot of that from these armed groups. A lot of you can just say I call it nonsense. That's my word for it. But they're just trying to keep up this illusion that they're fighting for the people, which they aren't.
And sadly, it works in a significant segment of the population that is just predisposed to be, sympathetic to the Palestinians. And people see what they want to see. That's unfortunate. Joe, thank you for joining us today. A pleasure. We'll catch up, I'm sure, in a couple of days. And you just keep up that great work. By the way, the information that we talked about here, I'm all getting on Joe's Twitter feed. Joe, go to @Joe Truzman on Twitter, or X, I think it's called now.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I know.
It's hard for me. But yeah, so Joe, just keep up the great work. Thanks again. And great having you.
Yeah, absolutely. Always a pleasure being here. And also, of course, I'm writing on Long War Journal.
Absolutely.
Got what we've been publishing there over the last days. I'll probably have another one today or tomorrow on Hamas's shadow unit, which involves who actually is a special division that is specially trained to hold hostages. So they're likely involved in holding hostages. So definitely recommend our listeners to read that when it's up. Like I said, either later today or tomorrow. But yeah, so definitely check out Long War Journal and of course FDD's website. So, but yeah, pleasure being here, Bill, as always, and we'll talk again soon.
Yep, catch you, Joe. Thanks again. Yeah, looking forward to reading that myself. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for today's episode of Generation Jihad. Just a reminder, you can find us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe and leave us a review, preferably a positive one if we earned it. Thanks again. We'll see you all again soon.